He meant to text his friend, but his boss read it instead. Before we begin, I'd love to know something. Where in the world are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments what you think about this story when it's over. I really love reading your thoughts. The message that wasn't meant to be read. Ethan Miller had built his life on being careful. Careful with words. Careful with tone. Careful with expectations. At work, he was the kind of man people trusted but rarely noticed. He arrived early, left late, and filled the gaps others ignored. If something broke, Ethan fixed it. If a deadline loomed, Ethan stayed. If silence was required, Ethan mastered it. His boss appreciated that. At least, that's what Ethan told himself. Mr. Richard Caldwell was a man who valued control more than connection. He spoke softly, but every sentence felt measured, sharpened. He never raised his voice, never insulted anyone directly. His disappointment came in subtler forms. A pause, a look, a correction, delivered just loudly enough for others to hear. Ethan had learned to fear that quiet disappointment. At 31, single, and living alone in a modest apartment on the edge of the city, Ethan worked as a project coordinator in a mid-sized consulting firm. It wasn't his dream job, but it paid the bills. More importantly, it gave him structure, something he had clung to ever since his father passed away years earlier. Structure kept things from falling apart. That Tuesday had begun like most others. Coffee too hot. Inbox too full. Calendar already behind. By noon, Ethan was juggling 3 projects at once, answering emails while sitting in a meeting that should have been an email itself. When the client suddenly changed their requirements again, Ethan adjusted quietly, already calculating how many extra hours it would take to make it work. Then came the meeting. The conference room was cold, glass walls reflecting the city outside. Ethan stood near the screen, presenting updated projections. His voice was steady, even confident, until Caldwell interrupted. "Let's stop there," he said calmly. Ethan paused. Caldwell leaned forward slightly, fingers folded. "You're accounting for ideal conditions," he said. "We don't operate in ideal conditions." A few people shifted in their seats. Ethan nodded. "I can revise." "You should have revised before presenting," Caldwell replied, not unkindly. "Next time, think before you speak." The room went silent. Ethan felt heat rise to his face. "Of course," he said. The meeting moved on, but something inside Ethan didn't. By the time he got home that night, the exhaustion felt different. Not physical, emotional. He kicked off his shoes, dropped his keys on the counter, and stood in the dim kitchen staring at nothing. The apartment felt too quiet, like it was waiting for him to say something. His phone buzzed. Mark. "You alive?" "You vanished today." Mark had been Ethan's closest friend since college. Loud where Ethan was quiet, honest where Ethan filtered himself. Mark was the one person Ethan never had to perform for. Ethan sat on the couch and opened the chat. His fingers moved faster than his thoughts. "Man, today was brutal. Caldwell embarrassed me in front of everyone. No matter what I do, it's never enough." He paused, then continued. "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing just trying to keep this job." The words felt dangerous and relieving. Ethan leaned back, exhaled, then added the sentence he had never allowed himself to form fully. "I don't even know why I'm still there." He stared at the screen. For a moment, he felt lighter. Then he hit send. The relief lasted less than a second. The screen refreshed. Ethan frowned. The name at the top of the conversation was wrong. Very wrong. Mr. Caldwell. Ethan's heart dropped violently, like missing a step in the dark. "No, no, no," he whispered. He sat up, staring at the phone, as if it might correct itself. It didn't. The messages were there. All of them. Delivered. Read. 3 gray dots appeared beneath Caldwell's name, then disappeared, then appeared again. Ethan's hands began to shake. He tried to type. Nothing came out. There was no sentence that could undo honesty once it was seen. No apology that could rewind the moment. No explanation that didn't sound like panic. His phone buzzed. A reply. Ethan closed his eyes. His mind raced ahead, filling the silence with futures he didn't want to live. A quiet termination. A polite handshake. A recommendation letter that meant nothing. He finally opened the message. Mr. Caldwell, come see me tomorrow morning, 8:30. That was it. No anger, no explanation, no reassurance. Just a time. Ethan dropped the phone onto the couch and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His chest felt tight, breath shallow. The truth he hadn't meant to share was now out of his control. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he replayed the moment, his thumb pressing send, the name at the top of the screen, the realization, too late. At 3:17 a.m., Ethan sat up in bed. For the first time in years, he asked himself a question he had avoided. When did I stop being honest with the people who mattered? The office was unusually quiet the next morning. Ethan arrived early, earlier than he ever had. He sat at his desk, staring at the clock, watching each minute crawl toward 8:30. At 8:28, his phone buzzed. Mr. Caldwell, my office. Ethan stood. As he walked down the hallway, something strange happened. The fear was still there, but underneath it was clarity. For once, there was nothing left to hide. He knocked. Come in, Caldwell said. Ethan stepped inside, bracing himself for whatever consequence honesty would bring. Mr. Caldwell didn't look up when Ethan entered the office. He was seated behind his desk, glasses low on his nose, reading something on his tablet with the same calm precision he applied to everything else. The office itself was immaculate, minimalist, orderly, intimidating in its restraint. Ethan stood just inside the door, hands loosely clenched at his sides. Sit, Caldwell said without looking up. Ethan obeyed. The silence stretched. It wasn't the comfortable kind. It was deliberate, calculated, the kind of silence designed to make people fill it with apologies they hadn't planned to give. Caldwell finally set the tablet down and folded his hands. I read your message, he said. Ethan nodded. His throat felt tight. Yes, sir. Another pause. Was it meant for me? Caldwell asked. Ethan hesitated only a fraction of a second. Then he shook his head. No. Caldwell studied him carefully, but it was honest. Yes, Ethan said. His voice was steady now. Surprisingly so. It was. The word hung between them. Honest. Caldwell leaned back in his chair. Do you know how many people lie to me every day, Ethan? Ethan blinked, caught off guard. I know. Everyone, Caldwell said calmly. They lie with enthusiasm, with smiles, with confidence. They tell me everything is fine when it isn't. They tell me they understand when they don't. He paused. You didn't do that. Ethan didn't know what to say. Caldwell continued. That doesn't mean there aren't consequences. Ethan nodded again. I understand. For the first time since entering the office, Caldwell's expression softened not into kindness, but into something closer to reflection. Tell me, he said. How long have you felt this way? Ethan swallowed. Longer than I admitted to myself. Why didn't you say anything? The question landed heavier than Ethan expected. Because I was afraid. Because I didn't think it would matter. Because I thought being quiet was safer. Instead, he said, because I didn't think I was allowed to. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. Allowed? Yes, Ethan said. I thought if I spoke honestly, I'd be punished for it. Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Caldwell removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. That, he said quietly, is on me. Ethan looked up, surprised. I built a culture where results mattered more than people, Caldwell continued. I thought efficiency required distance. Turns out, it breeds resentment. He looked directly at Ethan. Your message wasn't the first complaint I've heard. It was just the first one that didn't pretend. Ethan felt something shift inside his chest. What happens now? He asked. Caldwell considered the question carefully. Now, he said, we decide whether this is a place where honesty is punished or practiced. The conversation lasted longer than Ethan expected. They talked about workload, about unrealistic expectations, about silence mistaken for strength. Caldwell didn't apologize, but he listened. And for Ethan, that mattered more. When Ethan left the office, his job was still intact, but something else had changed. People noticed. Caldwell stopped correcting people publicly. Meetings became quieter but more open. Conversations happened behind closed doors instead of in hallways. Ethan didn't become louder. He became clearer. That night, Ethan sat on his couch with his phone in his hand, staring at Mark's name. He typed slowly this time. "I sent you something yesterday, except I didn't. I sent it to my boss." The reply came instantly. "Mark, you what?" Ethan smiled for the first time in days. "Yeah. Turns out honesty is terrifying." Mark responded, "And?" Ethan stared at the screen, thinking, and maybe I've been lying to myself longer than anyone else. He set the phone down and leaned back. For the first time, the apartment didn't feel quite as empty. Over the next few weeks, Ethan noticed changes not just at work, but in himself. He spoke up when something didn't make sense. He asked for clarity instead of absorbing frustration. He stopped measuring his worth by how invisible he could be. Some people didn't like it. Others respected it. Ethan learned something important. Not everyone will reward honesty, but silence always costs you. One evening, as he prepared to leave the office, Caldwell stopped by his desk. "You handled yourself well," he said. Ethan nodded. "Thank you." Caldwell hesitated. "That message, it shouldn't have reached me that way." Ethan smiled faintly. "No, but I'm glad it did." Caldwell returned the smile, briefly. "So am I." As Ethan walked out into the city, he felt lighter not because things were perfect, but because they were real. He pulled out his phone and opened a note. He typed one sentence and saved it. Say what needs to be said before it's said for you. The city moved around him, loud and indifferent. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt present in it. Ethan thought the hardest part was over. That was his next mistake. The days after, the message felt quieter on the surface, but underneath, something fundamental had shifted. The office still looked the same. The desks hadn't moved. The schedules were just as full, but people were different. Some coworkers treated Ethan with subtle distance. Others looked at him with something close to admiration. A few avoided him entirely, as if honesty were contagious and dangerous. Ethan noticed all of it. Honesty, he realized, didn't come with applause. It came with exposure. During meetings, Ethan spoke less, but when he did, his words mattered. He asked questions no one else wanted to ask. He pointed out issues early instead of absorbing them silently. Not everyone appreciated that. One afternoon, a senior manager pulled him aside. "You've changed," she said carefully. Ethan nodded. "I hope that's not a problem." She hesitated. "Just be careful. Not everyone wants the truth. Some people prefer comfort." Ethan smiled politely, but the words stayed with him. Outside of work, Ethan noticed changes too. He stopped numbing his evenings with distractions. He stopped scrolling endlessly to avoid thinking. He started sitting with discomfort instead of running from it. That wasn't easy. One night, he stared at his phone, thinking about sending another message, this time to his mother. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Their conversations were always polite, shallow, safe. He typed, deleted, typed again, then stopped. Honesty, he realized, wasn't about blurting out everything you felt. It was about choosing courage over convenience. He needed time. 2 weeks later, Caldwell called another meeting. This time, he didn't speak first. He let the room breathe. "I want to be clear," Caldwell said eventually. "Silence will no longer be mistaken for agreement." Some people shifted uncomfortably. "If something doesn't make sense," he continued, "say it. If expectations are unrealistic, we discuss them. That doesn't mean we lower standards. It means we raise communication." Ethan felt a quiet weight lift from his chest. This wasn't a revolution. but it was movement. The real test came unexpectedly. A major client complained loudly about delays that weren't Ethan's fault. The blame began to circulate, looking for a place to land. Old Ethan would have stayed quiet. New Ethan didn't. In the meeting, he spoke calmly. The delay happened because requirements changed mid-process, he said. We adapted, but the timeline wasn't adjusted accordingly. The room went still. The client frowned. Caldwell looked at Ethan. For a long second, Ethan wondered if this was the moment honesty would finally punish him. Instead, Caldwell nodded. He's right, he said. The tension broke. After the meeting, a coworker whispered, "That took guts." Ethan realized something important then. Honesty didn't make him fearless. It made him grounded. That evening, Ethan met Mark for dinner. "So," Mark said, grinning, "you accidentally changed company culture?" Ethan laughed softly. "Hardly." Mark leaned forward. "You know what you did, right?" Ethan shook his head. "You stopped disappearing," Mark said, "from your own life." That hit harder than Ethan expected. He had spent years thinking survival meant staying quiet, but silence had been its own kind of erosion. A month later, Ethan was offered a new role. More responsibility, more visibility, more risk. Caldwell was direct. "This position requires someone who speaks up," he said, "not someone who hides behind efficiency." Ethan thought carefully. Old Ethan would have accepted immediately. New Ethan asked a question instead. "What support comes with it?" Caldwell smiled slightly. "That's the right question." Ethan accepted, not because he felt safe, but because he felt honest. That night, alone in his apartment, Ethan opened the note on his phone. "Say what needs to be said before it's said for you." He added another line, "but say it with responsibility." Honesty, he was learning, wasn't reckless. It was intentional. "Ethan, not entirely. We need to talk." The dots appeared. Then, Caldwell, "Come by my office." Ethan stood up slowly, feeling the same nerves he'd felt months earlier, but this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't afraid of losing his job. He was afraid of losing himself. Caldwell listened without interrupting, as Ethan explained the issue. No defensiveness. No drama. Just facts, responsibility, and clarity. When Ethan finished, Caldwell leaned back. "This will delay things," he said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "But it prevents a bigger failure later." Silence filled the room. Then Caldwell nodded. "Good," he said. "That's leadership." Ethan exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. That night, Ethan walked home instead of taking the train. The city felt different now, not because it had changed, but because he had. He passed people rushing, heads down, phones glowing. He recognized the version of himself he used to be in them. Invisible, efficient, exhausted. At home, Ethan sat on the couch and opened his messages. Mark had sent something earlier. "Mark, proud of you, man. You're not hiding anymore." Ethan smiled. He opened a new message, one he had been avoiding. His mother. He typed slowly. "Hey, Mom. I've been quiet lately. Not because I don't care, but because I didn't know how to speak honestly. I'm learning now. I hope we can talk soon." He hit send. This time, he checked the name. Twice. The reply came a few minutes later. "Mom, I've always been here. I'm glad you're finding your voice." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Honesty, he realized, didn't always lead to confrontation. Sometimes, it led to connection. Months later, Ethan was asked to speak at an internal workshop. Not about productivity. Not about efficiency. About communication. He stood in front of a room full of people who looked a lot like he used to. Careful, quiet, brilliant, and unseen. "I once sent a message to the wrong person," he began. A few smiles appeared. "But it reached the right truth," he continued. "I wasn't unhappy because of my job. I was unhappy because I stopped being honest with others and with myself." The room was silent. "Silence feels safe," Ethan said, "but it costs you slowly. And one day, you wake up realizing you've been disappearing." He paused. "Say what needs to be said. Kindly, clearly, responsibly, before life forces the message out of you. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, but it no longer felt lonely. He looked around and realized something important. Nothing dramatic had changed. He lived in the same place, worked at the same company, lived the same life, but it felt completely different. Because it was his now, Ethan opened the note on his phone one last time. He reread the sentence that had followed him through the story. Say what needs to be said before it's said for you. Then he added the final line, and always check where your words are going, but never silence them. He locked the phone, turned off the lights, and went to sleep knowing that the worst mistake of his life had taught him the most important lesson. Sometimes, the message you send by accident is the truth you were too afraid to send on purpose. And growth begins the moment you stop disappearing from your own life.